All right, it looks like it's evening out, and I'm sure we're going to have a few stragglers join us as we come back after our summer holidays. So hi, everyone, and welcome back to our Friday Discovery Sessions. I'm Natalie Irwin, Director of Stakeholder Engagement here at Efficiency Canada. I'm happy you're all here to join me for what I believe is the start of another great series that we have lined up for you until the end of 2020. I hope you enjoyed our unprofessional networking sessions hosted by my colleague, Kirsten, during Fridays in August. I know a lot of you had fun, and we learned a lot about people, especially during the talent show. I have heard from several of you had a good time, and looking forward to starting again with these discovery sessions. So for those of you that are new, we ask that you hold your questions until the end during the general community discussion period. This is about 20 minutes, so there's usually plenty of time to get to all of our questions after our guests kick us off with insights on the topic that we're going to be discussing for approximately the same time, so 20 minutes again. We have a pretty hard stop at 12:45 Eastern time so that you can get back to your day and those last minute tasks off your list before you head into the weekend. So without further ado, let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today our two guest speakers who join us from the West Coast of Canada, Jackie Kanyuk, Program Delivery Manager at BC Nonprofit Housing Association, who is joined by Steve Fetterly, Lead Energy Engineer from Impact Engineering. They will share how multi-year retrofit program in the Kootenay region of BC supported 30 nonprofit housing societies implement over 100 energy conservation projects. So pretty impressive, as well as how taking a regional and partnered approach led to greater savings and efficiencies. I'm really looking forward to this. So welcome, Jackie and Steve.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks so much. Yeah. We're joining you here in the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh in Vancouver, BC. Really great to get a chance to iron a shirt and talk to other people who aren't just my team on a morning. So I think a lot of us are working away diligently in our own corner of energy efficiency. So I think it's really important for us to look up, gather ourselves and share a bit about the work that we do and have a broader conversation. So I want to thank Natalie and Efficiency Canada for bringing us together. This webinar is called The Power of a Region, Retrofit Successes. We will be speaking about nonprofit housing in the Kootenay region of British Columbia, as well as the partnerships that made this program work. So just quick overview, we're going to introduce ourselves and the nonprofit housing sector, how they're performing energy-wise, what we've observed as an energy coach and an engineer. I'll go through the program the retrofit program, how it came together. Steve will provide detail on engineering, design, and support provided by Impact Engineering, and we'll share the successes that we had, the lessons learned, and hopefully we can bring it back to the Q&A to a broader conversation about how local governments and regions can play a role in retrofit programs. So I work for BC Nonprofit Housing Association. Our mission is to empower BC's nonprofit housing sector through education, advocacy, and support. This is our mighty asset management team who I see and work with every day. We provide capital planning services to the nonprofit housing sector. We act as an energy coach and retrofit coach, bringing societies from start to finish. And providing access to much needed training and definitely that funding and engineering. And we work quite closely with the Provincial Housing Authority, BC Housing, as well as the utilities out here, BC Hydro and Fortis BC, and engineering firms.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie, and thanks, Natalie and Efficiency Canada for having us this morning. I'm Steve Fetterly, and with this team of individuals at Impact Engineering. So we're mechanical engineers and energy professionals focusing on making that positive impact for the environment. We aim to reduce operating costs, improve thermal comfort, and decarbonize building operations.
And this is the nonprofit housing sector's buildings. The building profile is quite diverse. Over half of the sector is multi-unit residential. That includes care homes and shelters. And then we have just over 30% that are townhomes, and then a little over 10% are single-family homes and duplex homes. The populations they serve are just as diverse. We see low-income housing for seniors, families, women, people experiencing mental health and homelessness issues. Likewise, the energy profile of the buildings, mostly it's a combination of natural gas, hydroelectricity, some combination thereof. We do see some propane in some very few regions, and I should also mention that this does not include any First Nations on reserve housing. So about 10 years ago, our organization did an asset analysis of the buildings in the sector and found that they have a much higher than average energy use intensity. Apartments and MURBs are over 60% worse performing than on average, likewise with the single detached homes. And when we do our energy audits, what we often see is a lot of old equipment with little to no HVAC controls. Definitely some lacking insulation, and same with the performance of the windows. You still see single pane windows, as well as outdated lighting technology, such as this T12 magnetic ballast there. So as a result of this aging equipment, and there's obviously inefficiencies there. We see a lot of heat loss without that high performance envelope. A lot of overheating, which we'll see in the Kootenay region. Deferred maintenance, a lot of property managers can't get to everything, will lead to some equipment breaking down, and people have no choice but to just do a like-for-like replacement. The result of all this is higher utility costs, of course, which can lead to any tenants who are paying utilities. That contributes to energy poverty in the sector. Certainly low occupant comfort, which is important with vulnerable populations such as seniors. So all around there's loss of efficiency opportunities, and there's some great rebate and incentive offers out there that they're missing out on as well. So knowing and seeing all of this, my asset management team kind of works to create opportunities. So in the Kootenay region, there's a fairly large trust, the Columbia Basin Trust. They're a large community project funder. We were able to approach them with the asset analysis that we had and look very specifically at the buildings in their region and say, hey, there's an opportunity to do something here. We proposed a multi-year energy retrofit program to the Columbia Basin Trust. We did this in partnership with data and logistics from BC Housing. And lo and behold, in 2017, we were able to launch the Columbia Basin Trust Energy Retrofit Program. So administered by the asset management team at BC NPHA and BC Housing. The criteria was projects needed to have a positive return on investment. Those nonprofits needed to have a capital replacement plan, or just be in good financial shape. They couldn't replace any capital repairs that were already planned with committed funding. And they needed to be in good standing as an organization. So just zooming into the region itself, it's just south of Alberta. This is little southeastern corner of BC. Not so little, there's 3 mountain ranges through it. So we're looking at mountain climates here, a population of about 165,000. Some of the towns and cities there, Cranbrook, Nelson, Trail, Fernie. And we found 50 nonprofit housing societies in the region, 130 buildings. So we did outreach to all 50 societies to let them know, hey, this funding is going to be coming available. Are you interested? Can we do an audit of your building? That's a fax machine. So we worked with quite a different range of organizations, some very large, like the Canadian Mental Health Association for the Kootenays, but then much smaller places where they just had a senior volunteer run board who were helping with the operation of maybe just one building. So we did whatever we could to reach out to everyone to let them know that this program was happening. And we took a trip, the three of us took a trip out there to do some of the free walkthrough audits, so ASHRAE level 1. On 70 of those buildings, we were able to provide reports with all the potential energy conservation measures, and as well let them know what funding was there. So the idea of this program was to take a look at, yes, there's a rebate for lighting, or there's a rebate for your efficient like gas appliances, and put those all together in a business case. So we are very heavily assisted with that program application and the business case. For those projects that had larger, more complex ECMs, we did 26 sites that needed further engineering studies. So we were able to bundle those for a level 2 energy study, which I'll let Steve talk about now.
Awesome, thanks Jackie. So to dive a bit deeper into the engineering side and take some of those projects further that Jackie mentioned, we were brought on board as one of the engineering firms to deliver some of these scope items. So that started with ASHRAE level 2 energy studies. The benefit of that ASHRAE level 2 compared to the level 1 walkthrough that Jackie's team performed is we get a little deeper into to identify energy savings opportunities and develop a financial analysis for energy savings for each measure, as well as provide rough construction budgets to start shaping the project delivery. We also performed some detailed design, which included sizing and selecting equipment, as well as producing drawings and specifications. And then finally, we worked to develop the tender and RFP packages for installation contractors and conducted project management throughout the construction. So some of the scope that we performed was, the large part of it was to install air source heat pumps at 6 different sites in the Kootenays, 1 long-term care facility and 5 apartment or townhome complexes. The main goal was to replace the electric baseboard heating with these air source heat pumps in order to provide energy savings, as well as provide cooling in these buildings that didn't have it before. So as Jackie mentioned, there's been an uptick of issues that result from overheating, obviously, especially in buildings with vulnerable populations like seniors. So that was an added benefit to adding this heat pump technology. Then we also conducted LED lighting upgrades at 14 different sites for pure energy savings. For a bit more detail on the mini split heat pump systems, so the idea was to install a mini split system at each individual suite, if the tenant suites were individually metered, or a multi-zone system at that long-term care facility where the society paid for all of the utility bills. So on average, a lot of the suites are about 600 to 700 square feet, which resulted in several small heat pumps to do the heating and cooling of the space, about 3/4 to 2 tons of capacity. The good news here was that those small units typically only require 15 to 25 amp breakers, which were very common in these buildings. And that enabled us to retain backup heating by the electric baseboards for any peak heating during winter design conditions, as well as provide some redundancy in different rooms. All the heat pumps were cold climate, rated down to -13 Fahrenheit or -25 Celsius, which met our design heating criteria in this climate zone, and would do most of the heating in other parts of Canada as well. These heat pumps had a seasonal coefficient of performance of about 3. So that's at COP. If anyone's not familiar with that, essentially means the COP of 3 means that about 1/3 of the electricity consumption would be needed for heating. So because we had 6 sites slated for this heat pump installations, we were able to take advantage of the economies of scale and looked for ways in order to treat these projects as one larger one rather than several individual ones. So first off, we started by sizing and sourcing suitable heat pump equipment options. And like I mentioned, we resulted with a large quantity, over 70 units of very similar sizes of equipment. So that enabled us to leverage suppliers and negotiate bulk purchase agreements in order to control equipment costs. And then lastly, it also enabled us to ensure that energy savings were maximized through equipment operation, as well as any available utility incentives from the local utility programs based on eligible equipment. So beyond being able to secure that bulk purchase agreement, we were able to bundle engineering as well as installation by applying a regional approach. So you can see on the map on the right that the 6 sites were spread across Golden, as well as a few of those cities in the southern Kootenays. And what worked out well was that there was a similar design methodology for each site, which lent well to bundling engineering for consistent design and project management. From there, we were able to solicit suppliers in order to reach out to experienced local contractors to make sure that the installation contractors were qualified to do the installs. And then by getting that list of contractors, we established regions based on the interest from those contractors according to their capacity and availability. And it kind of sculpted itself in order to form the regions for reasonable travel in order to mitigate construction costs, but also allow for competitive bidding, which was the last piece in order to bundle those projects to make contracts more attractive, to get competitive bids from those local experienced contractors. So the results of the project was a lot of happy tenants excited for lower energy bills for heating, and then also that ability to provide cooling in the summer. They were also quite pleased with the minimally intrusive installation of these localized ductless mini split heat pumps. And that also helped a lot for the project and the funding available for cost and schedule control. It was reported that the heating and cooling was pretty effective from these heat pump units with no need for the backup heating by electric baseboards in order to get that energy savings. And then additionally, the tenants were surprised at how quiet those outdoor heat pump units were, where there's no outdoor equipment before, especially when installed side by side. So no reported noise issues, which was great to hear. And then just to wrap up, some of the successes of this project delivery model was definitely started with that bulk purchase agreement in order to treat several small projects as a whole to get the best costing we could and deliver the project as efficiently as possible. The standardized equipment also allowed for design and installation efficiencies, which resulted in low average installation costs. Turned out to be about $7,500 per suite all in, including equipment. The standard equipment also gave way to reliable manufacturer support throughout the design process, as well as construction and operation. This benefited the societies also with the consistent maintenance programs, same spare parts, and just that support during operation. So especially because some of the sites were of the same society, so that gave them the benefit to treat all of their buildings the same. And then lastly, definitely those bundled tender packages were key to not only attract good contractors, but also encourage competitive bidding in order to get the best cost project available. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Jackie to summarize some of the project impacts.
Great, thanks. I'll just blast through some of these last slides here. This is Passmore Lodge. We had, it says 90 measures. There were multiple buildings on site, so it actually ended up being over 100 measures, but we had, 10 sites that did furnaces, 6 condensing boilers, domestic hot water. We did just 1 controls, and then makeup air. We did 18 envelope retrofits total and 35 LED retrofits altogether. This is just an example of some of the buildings. So this was in 15 different municipalities, 31 societies, and 60 buildings total. And here's the retrofit cost and the breakdown between the different funders. So the trust ended up contributing $2.28 million for the multi-year project. BC Housing 1.2 million, and then 65,000 from, oh sorry, 650,000 from the utilities. And so we ended up working with about over 30 contractors and 4 different engineering firms, 2 from the local region and then 2 from the lower mainland. So the local purchases were about 1.2 million within the actual region itself. And then this entire program provided employment for over like 1,000 hours for contractors, which is the equivalent of six and a quarter years of full-time work. So the local economic development successes were fantastic. And these were some of, this is the amount of, these are the electrical savings and then the GHG savings in addition to the gigajoule savings. So basically it was enough savings to power 276 homes and enough GJ savings to take 53 cars off the road a year. So what we learned is that this project probably couldn't go the way it was if we didn't have that third source funder, of course. A lot of societies don't have provincial funding. Some of those retrofits we did don't have utility rebates, and then also some projects are just too small for, you know, getting a larger federal funder like CMHC or FCM. So we're looking at local government and regional retrofit funds. If municipalities or regions look to focus on low-income housing, there's a lot of retrofit job creation as a benefit. Working with nonprofit, you're able to improve some of the worst performing building stock in a municipality, as well as enhance the well-being of vulnerable populations. So that's just some of the benefits of working regionally with nonprofit housing. So I did a quick look to see, I know it's often the feds and province and utilities who provide a lot of retrofit funds, but here's some examples of some municipalities who have their own programs. And yeah, I would love to hear about some others that we don't know about. And that's our quick little summary there. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie and Steve. So just before we start off the questions, I just want to remind people the 2 ways to ask questions are: one is at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see the Q&A where you can type in a question and I'll read it out for you. The second is you can raise your hand and then I can unmute you and you can ask your question yourself. But the only rule we have with asking questions is the same we have for our presenters, is that there's no sales pitches, please. Let's limit this to conversation. Let's see. I guess, oh, Jackie, actually, if you can go back a slide, you had a question for the audience there.
Yeah.
So you were actually wondering, you've put up 3 examples there of local governments or regional retrofit funds that you know about, but does anyone on the call know of any others? I'm actually curious. So I'm going to pose the question to our audience first. Feel free to type, try to read everything here. So feel free to type in the chat box. So we'll just leave the chat box open if you have any comments about that. And just a question is, will the slides be available afterwards? We actually are going to record this, and we have a web page now on our website where all past discovery sessions are housed, as well as on our YouTube page. So there's a few coming in. Steve has the Ontario Enbridge Home Winterproofing Program. Yep, so that's a utility. And then the Affordable Trust Fund Trust Program. So those are 2 great examples there. So if everyone just keep the examples coming so that other people from your region on the call can learn. So a few questions. Our first question here is, there's lots of moving pieces in making these projects successful, definitely. Assessments, identifying appropriate measures, identifying local contractors, monetary transactions at various levels. Kudos to your team for managing it all. 2 questions about the operations of the program. So first question is, what are some of the black box areas between or within all of these pieces that would have been benefited from more insight/transparency?
Oh, could they speak more to the transparency? I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question.
I'll see.
Did you get?
All right, so Madari, I've allowed you to chat here.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Hi, this is Maestro from Energy X Solutions. I guess what I meant by transparency is really that, like, as an example, when you, maybe that was potentially the wrong word to use, but really it was more, you know, let's say you hand over a project to a contractor to say, okay, please go to this location and work on this project, install these measures. A black box or something that you perhaps don't have insight into is maybe how that job is done or the time it takes to complete the job or any on-site issues that might have arisen until after the fact. Like you might only know about it until, you know, 2 weeks later or a week later when there's an invoice that's been submitted to you or a report that's been submitted. That's really what I meant. Is there any areas where you kind of just had to hand the reins over and wait to hear back?
Oh, great question. Yeah, now I'm trying to think back to all of this. The benefit of, so the 26 sites where they had a level 2 audit and the projects where impact engineering was, there was a project engineer who was doing the project management, and that also meant the final inspection and the report. So we had a lot of assurances on those projects, which was fantastic. So that was a great, just a great way to do energy retrofits. I should also mention that BC Hydro and Fortis actually came to the table with a new retrofit program for social housing, where they provide some funds for engineers to do the study and the implementation. So definitely helped as well. We did just make it clear in the funding agreements, which the contractors would have to have read as well, or they were sent to them, that you know, if the project wasn't as agreed, then I mean it would endanger you know, the funds and the rebates. I'm sure a lot of you know, a lot of consultants have to deal with that as well. Like the equipment has to be as specified, otherwise that rebate wouldn't be given. So I think with that understanding, and maybe a lot of also, I guess, contractors who have experience with the like high efficiency equipment, they start to kind of get to know those rebate programs. So we were able to kind of leverage the, you know, those rules that were already in place. Yeah, and
yeah, I could definitely add to that as well.
Thank
from
you.
on the installation side of things. Yeah, great question. So one of the hurdles that we dealt with and we identified early on was, especially because we're a firm in the Lower Mainland, so we've been to these sites but wouldn't be able to be there on site that frequently throughout construction. So we were, like I mentioned, we leveraged those suppliers in order to make sure we had a list of qualified contractors. We were definitely concerned with getting the right contractors that were not only experienced with the equipment, but could also handle the capacity within a reasonable time frame, so as to minimize intrusiveness to the society and just give them a good working product at the end of the day, especially because it's pretty, I mean, a mountain area is the best way to describe it. There's a lot of smaller towns and regions around there, so we're definitely concerned with getting qualified contractors that would normally be coming out of more metropolitan areas. But the way we did this was we used those suppliers, and we actually sent out a request for qualification to the contractors along with the manufacturer's commissioning checklist. So it enabled us to kind of test out those contractors and make sure that they knew what they were doing and they were qualified to bid on those jobs, which I think was key, because at the end of the day, we had a few interested parties and the bundling made sense that we were able to get at least 3 competitive bids on all the projects that were similar in pricing, and they checked all the boxes for qualification. So that was definitely a bit of a concern at first, but ended up being a relief, just having good people on site to make sure those projects get done effectively. And then the last piece, like Jackie mentioned, that additional funding that came along the way, which wasn't necessarily planned for through the utility programs. enabled for a bit more engineering support. So for the heat pump projects, for example, we designed them to be installed in a mock-up fashion. So each site had one suite that was totally completed as a mock-up and then reviewed by our engineering team before the contractor was able to be released on the rest of the building in order to make sure that everything was done appropriately.
It's awesome.
So-
Thank you, guys.
Another question here is, what was the time frame from start to finish on the bundled retrofit project?
So it began in earnest like summer 2017, just getting the word out, and then I think the actual approvals and everything, the actual like shovels in the ground was 2018, and just the final, yeah, the final projects just finished in early 2020. So yeah, about 2 years total of the work, and then about 3 years. And then of course, there was a lot of work building those partnerships. There's a lot of work up to creating those contracts and partnerships.
Yeah, definitely. Another question here is a part of the air tightness test. Did you guys do air tightness testing as part of the level 2 assessment?
We did not on any of our projects. I'm not sure if any of those, anything else went through that range, Jackie?
No, level 1 is fairly basic walkthrough, so no air testing.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that wasn't conducted was none of the projects really focused on building envelope. So there were some that had some building envelope components, like simple sealing where it was obvious, replacing weather stripping and things like that. But there was no major building envelope projects for new windows, full sale, that would normally kind of jump up to the next level of funding required. And our experience with BC Housing in British Columbia is they kind of already know, unfortunately, that a lot of these buildings are fairly leaky. So because of the age of construction on a lot of these buildings that were focused under the program, they didn't see a benefit to do any blower door testing.
So are you guys monitoring the performance?
We hope BC Hydro is.
Yeah, I've got a, BC Hydro has a measurement and verification because some of these heat pumps were put into townhouses, so it was a pilot. So yeah, we're waiting back to hear. We're eagerly waiting to hear the M&V results.
Definitely. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that most of the heat pump projects, it's only finally been a full year. So the last winter would have been the first heating season. And I think there is definitely some difficulties with a lot of those individual tenant meters and confidentiality to get through that BC Hydro is diligently working through. So yeah, we're hoping to have some actual reports on energy usage pretty soon.
Yeah, that was my next question. Have you gone through a winter yet? Another question here is from Aaron Taylor, is wondering whether cost benefit analysis or life cycle analysis was performed when selecting upgrades for your project.
No, I think that would have required a larger amount of funding to spend the time. So a lot of it was and much like working with the nonprofit housing sector, we don't get into that analysis. We just are looking at, we do know that there's now well over $800 million in deferred maintenance in the sector. I think it's climbing. I think it might be 100 million now, but so it's really just trying to get some of this replaced in such a way that isn't in an emergency like for like replacement. So yeah, we make those assumptions.
I wouldn't say, I mean, I'm not sure a lot of life cycle costing was done, but I mean, a few of those cost benefit analyses were done within the ASHRAE Level 2 study. But as I think somebody pointed out in the chat, that a lot of most of the buildings were heated by electric baseboards, so there weren't too many other options in order to provide cooling and get those electricity savings.
I guess we could mention that the second round of the funding, the province did come out with Clean BC, so it was to do electrification projects. So then some of the level 2s did look at cost benefit between those different energy systems.
Another question that's kind of related is from Christy here is, did you find anything unusual with the ASHRAE audits, and would you have done different items if you had gone blindly into the efficiency upgrade?
Good question. Interesting. I mean, I think what is, we had another team member out there recently doing building condition assessments for capital plans, and there's a lot of just additions. Like, you don't have the building plans, and there's a lot of buildings that just kind of got added to throughout the decades, and so that presents challenges during a walkthrough. And that is, I think, yeah, Steve can attest that there's definitely some Easter eggs within the buildings, but yeah, whether we do different, not sure, go for it.
Yeah, totally. I think, I mean, I'm always a big proponent to encourage that energy study, especially at an ASHRAE level 2 level first, just to help define the project scope and identify the most attractive measures and whether or not they're going to get a payback or a positive rate of return. So I think in general, a lot of the concepts, like for example, switching out those electric baseboards with split system heat pumps, we probably would have done without doing an ASHRAE level 2, but there was a lot of other measures that came up, like we mentioned, some of those really small building envelope, things like attic insulation that weren't appropriate. It's a pretty obvious, cost-effective, and long-term reliable solution to mitigate heat loss, weather stripping, and then even it helped on the lighting side, because LED upgrades pretty obvious, but it enabled the societies to kind of pick and choose what they wanted, different lighting in different areas. Some elected to do some motion sensor controls and some not. So it just allowed us to spend a bit more time up front and dig into a bit more of those details in order to deliver a better project at the end of the day, rather than just kind of running blind into the cookie cutter solutions.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like, if I mean, if you ask me if we could go back with even more money and do the same sites, then there would be envelope retrofits all around. But to make the return on investment, we had to, make decisions on which bang for your buck ECM was best.
Yeah, and that's why you're saying bundling is key.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just a few more questions here that we'll get to is, what energy simulation software or softwares were used by the engineering study teams? Do you know, Steve?
Yeah, so we used, I mean, most of it was just for sizing purposes, like Carrier's half hourly analysis program in order to make sure that we had cooling loads. But to be honest, because the buildings are pretty simple and we had access to a lot of the utility data, we were able to do a lot of energy modeling just spreadsheet based compared to climate data. And because of the number of suites and number of buildings within the same region, it showed a lot of consistencies between that modeling approach. So we were able to keep that also fairly cost conscious by not going deep into a more complicated or comprehensive energy model.
That makes sense. One last question here is, what were some of the fears of the co-ops to fully engage, other than obviously the cost of the retrofits, and what education, what key talking points kind of made them come around?
Really great question. A lot of these societies, as I mentioned, they have, just volunteer boards. Some of them I have to just call on a Tuesday because that's the only time someone was in the office. So just to give you a sense, but so yeah, there's definitely some apprehension moving forward. Is this going to be a lot of work for our small nonprofit housing group? But our reassurances were just how step by step BC nonprofit housing was going to do it. So we were there again to provide an audit, explain what we were doing, just explain it every step, provide the report, see, and there's this many measures. There were some societies that opted to not go forward with multiple measures just because they had limited capacity. So, and then the testimonials and the results afterwards, the level of trust that was built, the communication was often I was always CC'd by the contractors and by the society, so I knew what was happening. And people are often quite worried, and I think with good reason. On a retrofit, you know, you might be afraid of something happening before you get, like, just getting your rebate threatened. So people were definitely keeping us in the loop on that, because nobody wants to see that. No one wants to see the work go forward in a way that you know, threatens that funding. So yeah, trust is key, and just like very much step by step. And then that builds confidence too, and we hope that they will be able to do more replacements in the future.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that was one of the large successes of the program, is although it was a pretty high level funder and kind of started from a province level and worked its way down into individual societies and even buildings, that because we had local contractors, we had the great team at BC MPHA, BC Housing, consultant teams like ourselves, that all that communication was kept up. So it really enabled the societies to get what they wanted at the end of the day, which is definitely key for a lot of these large scale and regional projects. They weren't just stuck with whatever solution was kind of thrown at them. They were able to provide input to the point where, like I mentioned before, you know, one society wanted different lighting than what was existing in one room, and very picky over things like that. So, but it was great because it enabled them to get what they want and be happy with the project, and customize it depending on their needs with that high level funding available.
Yeah, so really having them as part of the process from the beginning sounds like that was key. And then I have to say, I think you had a lot of happy customers there, because you had a lot of photos. I don't know if you asked everyone to give a thumbs up in the photo, but you had a lot of people giving thumbs up.
It is so hard. I don't know the rest of the people across Canada, but like trying to get people in your retrofit photos, so I begged for a lot of those photos, and that was much thanks to actually Justine Cohen, the Director of Housing from Canadian Mental Health Association for the Kootenay. So she sent all the thumbs up sites. So they make our day. That really helps with the why, you know, why we're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. You can use those as part of your advertising campaign for next time. Happy customers. Well, thank you so much, Jackie and Steve, for joining us today, and thanks for everyone for the great questions and great conversations. I hope that you join us next Friday as we host a rescheduled session with the Atmospheric Fund, so building on our retrofit theme. And they're going to share their vision for a new kind of retrofit agency that will help Canada achieve our vision for retrofitting all homes and buildings by 2050. So I hope you join us again at noon Eastern Time next Friday. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy your weekend.